people say, what about their rights? And I'm cognizant of their rights. And I spent a lifetime in law enforcement protecting people's rights. But at the end of the day, the rights of our children must be first and foremost. We need to stand up as lawmakers. We need to give police the powers to take people that are suffering from mental illness to medical health professionals.
I don't rule out the fact that this Parkland, Florida school shooting is a massive false flag. Matter of fact, the more I study the contradictions and inconsistencies, the more I'm convinced that it is. There are some very fishy things happening that, of course, mainstream media isn't covering because they're complicit in selling the unthinking public a narrative that's attempting to transfer power from the people to the authorities. And I'll discuss all that in a future video. Personally, I think scenarios like these are mixtures of falsehood and reality, meant to benefit the few at the expense of the many. At the very least, this is a false flag meant to institute more freedom-snatching legislation. Regardless of what it is, let me tell you this: neither my individual freedoms nor yours are ever up for debate. Do what you want to do, but I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery any day. There's more honor in dying on your feet than living on your knees. If history has taught us anything, it's that evil people are resourceful and find the darndest ways to carry out their evil acts regardless of any laws in place to prevent them from doing so. But people still stupidly cling to gun control as the only way to deal with evil people, while our kids go to unprotected schools with unprotected teachers in unprotected classrooms and then are confused when kids get slaughtered by evil people who break every law in order to carry out their heinous acts. Let's face the facts. Laws only matter to those who are willing to obey them. And those law abiders are the ones who end up getting killed because politicians have seen fit to create criminal empowerment, law abider victimization zones. Gun-free zones are like the TSA. It's all security theater. The reality is that regardless of what you or I think, gun-free zones are the problem, not the guns. And when law abiders die tragic deaths, instead of saying, "Oh my God, our laws just ended a lot of innocent lives," they want to pile on more freedom-grabbing criminal empowerment laws. You can't legislate evil away. The facts show that legislation actually increases criminal activity. And if you don't believe me, just visit Chicago for a couple days. You'll get a healthy dose of the dangers of legislation. Gun-free zone laws and signs work as well as holding up a no-biting sign to a rabid dog and being stupid enough to expect it not to bite you. And if you don't believe me, take the words of this criminal right here.
I'm not worried about the government saying that I can't carry a gun. I'm gonna carry a gun anyway.
Evil people will always find a way to do evil things, and the logical response to evil actions is to empower the good people, not handcuff them with a series of knee-jerk laws. But back to this false flag. Not everything has to be fake. There can be real casualties as governments advance to steal more and more of your power and more of your control. And to discount the fact that state or federal government agents would kill civilians in order to bring about policy changes that will further enslave the people or accomplish a nefarious objective is to employ the ostrich method and turn a blind eye to history. If you know anything about government agencies, we can objectively conclude that they do not have our best interests at heart. Consider for just one moment a declassified document like Operation Northwoods. This operation, also known as the Cuba Project, was a proposed false flag operation against the Cuban government that originated with the U.S. Department of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States government in 1962. The proposal called for the Central Intelligence Agency or other U.S. government operatives to commit acts of terrorism against American civilians and military targets, blaming it on the Cuban government and using it to justify a war against Cuba. The plan detailed in the document included the possible assassination of Cuban émigrés, sinking boats of Cuban refugees on the high seas, hijacking planes, blowing up a U.S. ship, and orchestrating violent terrorism in U.S. cities. The document itself is said to provide, quote, descriptions of pretexts which would provide justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. If you haven't heard of this or read it, Google Operation Northwoods PDF and you can read the actual document for yourself. Once you read that, tell me if you will ever trust your government again. False flags like these stir up national indignation and cause the people to clamor to the government, that terrorist organization that caused the people to fear in the first place. It causes the people to cry out to the creators of the problem to come up with a solution to save us and keep our kids safe. In situations like this, the people are more than happy to give away their freedoms in exchange for the added security of their oppressors. And Northwoods was not an isolated incident of state-planned evil. It was the false flag known as the Gulf of Tonkin incident that provided the pretext for military intervention in Vietnam. As a result, we lost 54,000 men in that war, not to mention costing the lives of 1.3 million people, including innocent civilians, as our government filled the coffers of the military-industrial complex with taxpayer money. These are just two of many objective examples of state-funded terrorism. And we still trust and cry out to our government to save us? It's a great rule of thumb, reasonable and logical to conclude that if a tragic event ever happens or is reported to have happened, to first question the authenticity, origin, and official narrative, since all three of these are usually smokescreens for the implementation of nefarious actions that serve to take power away from the people and transfer that power to the authorities. And this school shooting is no different. The media is working the unthinking masses up into a frenzy.
They say a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. We call BS. They say guns are just tools like knives and are as dangerous as cars. We call BS. No, they say that no laws could have been able to prevent the hundreds of senseless tragedies that have occurred. We call BS. That us kids don't know what we're talking about, that we're too young to understand how the government works. We call BS.
As they blindly discard critical thinking and take to the streets to beg their authoritarian masters to take away more and more of their individual liberties so that they can be safe. Benjamin Franklin's words should be ringing in our ears. Those who would give up their liberty for a little temporary security deserve neither liberty nor security. Let's examine very briefly part of what's being promoted here. And we'll start with this actress named Megyn Kelly. Check this out.
How do we find the potentially deadly needles in these haystacks who are likely to blow? Well, we could start by paying attention to things like Facebook posts with ominous gun pictures, coupled with social alienation and other red flag warning signs. But then what?
Now, I didn't fully understand the implications of what she was saying until I played it back again.
How do we find the potentially deadly needles in these haystacks who are likely to blow?
These potentially deadly needles in these haystacks that she's talking about are people who have not even committed a crime but exhibit what she calls red flag warning signs. One of those warning signs, according to Kelly, is posting ominous gun pictures. Can you get more subjective? Kelly continues.
Then what? Are we really going to loosen the standards for involuntary commitment in this country?
But then what? She asks, are we really going to loosen the standards for involuntary commitment in this country? You know what she's saying, right? The commitment she's talking about is taking people merely suspected of being victims of mental health regression and committing them to psychological testing and evaluation. And the involuntary part means taking these people against their will. But this fact is going to become much clearer to you as we proceed. Then she says right after this,
even if we could pay for that, good luck convincing the ACLU that it's legal.
Now, why would you have to convince the ACLU that taking someone who hasn't even committed a crime against their will to get a mental health evaluation that will determine whether they're mentally fit to own a gun or not? Why would you have to try to convince anyone that this was legal when it's clearly an immoral action based on the subjective whim of an authoritarian lawmaker? Now, what Megyn Kelly is promoting here may seem benign, but it's not. During a nationally televised interview, Sheriff Israel from the Broward County Sheriff's Department, this mouthpiece for government propaganda and fear-mongering, echoed Megyn Kelly's sentiments when he said this.
Different states talk about being able to involuntarily take a suspect or a subject who might be the victim of mental health illness and bringing them to a facility where they could be evaluated and treated.
Are we really going to loosen the standards for involuntary commitment in this country?
So now we have this theme that they're implanting into the subconscious minds of the brain-dead masses. They seek to leave your fate into the hands of a select few authorities who can subjectively determine whether or not you meet their criteria of being a victim of mental health illness. Upon these shifting sands, they'll use their monopolized power to treat you as a criminal when you haven't even committed a crime. And that reminds me of this.
Mr. Marks, by mandate of the District of Columbia Pre-Crime Division, I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dubin that was to take place today, April 22nd, at 0800 hours 4 minutes.
No, I didn't do anything.
In Florida, we call it a Baker Act. The only time a police officer can Baker Act a subject is when they're an immediate threat to themselves or someone else. We keep saying we're going to have conversation. We got to stop having conversation and we got to do something proactive.
In other words, we need to be able to Baker Act anybody that we suspect might be the victim of mental illness. And it's going to be totally our call. And the people are falling for this hook, line, and sinker, not realizing that this flings the door wide open to law enforcement acting as pre-crime units, taking rights away from people that they deem mentally unfit. And the irony to all this is that the law enforcement agents who would be the ones making these calls are statistically the least fit to perform this action, since they themselves are 15 times more likely than the general public to be spouse and child abusers. Guys, let the world and the Google Thought Police know what you think about this in the comments section below. The people are worked up in a frenzy and things are happening very fast. Don't give up one iota of your individual rights to anybody for any reason. Guys, thanks for watching my video. You'll want to take a couple minutes to look through my shirt store. I've got over 50 hard-hitting designs like facts don't care about your feelings, protecting and serving the crap out of you, legalize freedom, truth is treason in the empire of lies, nobody for president, start leading yourself, taxation is theft, CNN, the communist news network, do no harm, take no, born free, taxed to death, sheepvolution, and you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. There are way more designs, and I'm adding new ones every week, so check back often. The purpose of these shirts is to interrupt regularly scheduled life with a thought-provoking, hard-hitting nugget of truth. Your purchase keeps content flowing on my demonetized, YouTube-censored, advertiser-unfriendly channel. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.